but some of these features aren't going to be available for months and months and potentially even years. So Basho is centered on performance improvement. So Cardano, as you'll see a little bit later, they do not, I mean, they might scale well, but their transaction speed is very low. It's like 7 or 8 transactions per second, which is puny compared to some projects out in the wild. So in that sense, they're kind of selling themselves off of, hey, we're gonna be great soon. And if anyone disagrees with me, happy to hear it in the comments. I don't know if there's any Cardano fan people here, but really interested to hear your perspective. And then finally, this is a pretty great selling point and something that one of my good investor buddies and trader friends, it's one of his investor theses. It's one part component of his investor thesis is that he's looking for projects that have really well-defined governance and treasury systems. So that's called Voltaire, which hasn't been implemented yet. But when we talk about a treasury system or a governance system, it's a way for the community to self-organize to support development going forward. So it's not sustainable to keep raising money like, a second ICO or, to raise venture capital, because one of the great things about cryptocurrency is that you don't need necessarily to use those avenues for investment. So with Dash is a great example. Dash has created this war chest of millions of dollars where they'll ask people in the community to donate, and I think that they actually will take a small slice, like a 1% fee of transactions that happen, like a very small, maybe even 0.5%, and it goes directly to this foundation to support development in the future, which I think is pretty brilliant. And we don't see a lot of projects do that. I'm not entirely clear or sure, like my friend is, that this is like a great indicator to invest, but I will say it does communicate that people are thinking long term, and that projects are thinking long term, which it does very much look like Cardano is. So, what makes Cardano special? Honestly, not that much in my opinion. They want to implement proof of stake, which is good, nothing special, but if people know the distinction between proof of work or proof of stake, it's supposedly better for the environment and it stops decentralization. So proof of work, I mean, that's not actually true either. You can just accumulate a lot of coins and then you'll get more rewards relative to the amount of coins that you have. But it definitely is kind of the future to implement proof of stake for projects. Cardano references their commitment to scientific process. So whereas some projects just release a white paper and that they wrote for 10 minutes in their basement, Cardano seems to be working with some very prestigious scientists and organizations to validate a lot of their work. This idea of a decentralized governance structure, which, as we said earlier, it's a way for the community, so the larger Cardano community, like individuals like you and I, you and me, we can participate in voting and asking where the community, or discussing where the community should go, or talking about new features. So they really are thinking long term in that way, which I think is pretty unique and you don't see on a lot of projects, although a lot of projects talk about doing this. Innovations in how Cardano is creating cryptocurrencies. So they talk a lot about, they talk in their, like on their website and on their documentation, a lot about their method. It almost sounds like, this is a terrible example, I apologize, but it's the first thing that came to mind. I don't know if anyone's ever watched The Great British Bake Off on Netflix, but it's like, you've got a baking challenge and you have to bake a cake, or maybe like bread is a better case, right? And so they get a prompt saying you have to bake this very specific bread, and the judges see the bread, right? At the end of the day, you're still creating the same thing. You're still creating a cryptocurrency, and you're still actually creating it with the same ingredients in the same way. The only difference is maybe like the execution. And that's a very bad example. But you get the idea that like with Cardano, to be completely honest, it kind of looked like a lot of the documentation was very fluffy. It was like, hey, we were a cryptocurrency like everyone else, and now we're trying to distinguish ourselves. And that's kind of what I got when I'm talking about this fifth bullet point, that they're kind of building using similar technologies that everyone else is building. They're just communicating that they're doing it in a way that's like unique than other ones. So unless I'm missing something, that was kind of my general impression. One area that they also want to tackle is being the Internet of Blockchains. I can't pronounce this word for the life of me. Interoperability problem. So interoperability is how different blockchains communicate with each other, and a lot of different projects are looking to tackle that. So whether it's OX or what's the other one that I hold? Or Loopring. There are many projects, Cosmos, that are looking to handle the Internet of Blockchains, to become the Internet of Blockchains king. And this doesn't necessarily make Cardano special. It does make them a little bit unique in that they're looking to tackle this problem, but they are by no means the only one trying to. Okay, sorry, I'm looking in the question. Someone said, I like the bake-off analogy. Thank you. That was a risky one. But I went for it. So the good, if you bought 4 months ago, it was good for you. That's honestly that's all I could muster. They do seemingly have a great team. Sorry for all some capitalized letters in here. Great concepts for how a blockchain project should be governed, which isn't shouldn't be taken lightly. I'm actually working with some very underground projects right now, and that's kind of always an open question, like how do we govern? And a lot of projects stumble around and figure that out. So the fact that they've been able to do that, it does communicate that they're thinking very long term, and they are putting structures in place to support ongoing developments. And the funding mechanism is also, I think, really valuable. That there'll be a way that they can support themselves. Also, another thing on here which I didn't put is that they do have on their roadmap, they want to be quantum resistant. So as quantum computers start to propagate and become more prominent in society, Cardano will be resistant to hacking from quantum computers, which are way stronger than regular computers. The only thing, though, is that that's just kind of tacked onto the end of their roadmap, and I'll show you what I mean. So this will actually be a great example. So those of you that are here that don't usually attend the trading room, I'll kind of go off the cuff, and you'll see kind of an inside look into my brain a little bit. So if you stick around, I'll show you what I'm talking about and what I mean there when I go onto their roadmap page. So the bad, only 4 transactions per second. That is laughable. There are some like Ray blocks that are seeing, hundreds of transactions per second, maybe even more at this point. I'm not sure, but you'll receive Ray blocks in a matter of seconds rather than minutes or even an hour. So I didn't actually test the exact speed, but all the documentation quoted about 4 transactions per second, which is not good by any means. The majority of the roadmap is not developed, so it always, there are so many projects in the cryptocurrency space, and I talk about how, when you're looking at an ICO, you always want to be cautious that you're investing into something that, has been worked on, at least a little bit. Too many times I'll see an ICO that says, hey, we're launching our ICO next month, and we're starting development the month after, and then we're going to be releasing the product in 2030. Like that, that doesn't, nobody's got time for that. That doesn't really work. So it always kind of makes me pause when something is at such a high valuation already, and they haven't even released not only the majority of their roadmap, but most of their large quantities of their roadmap. So it makes me wonder, are they just tacking things onto their roadmap to show people that they're going to do things, but they haven't yet? Maybe why do they need to communicate that at that level of detail? Transaction fees. I mean, transaction fees are kind of going out of style a little bit. One of my big investment thesis, one big component of my investment thesis for 2018 is that there is a new type of technology that will supplant blockchains, and those are feeless, so they require no fees to as you're transacting in the network. So just like anytime I see a project that has transaction fees, I automatically give it a ding, only because in 2018, I think that we're going to see newer models, and I think investors and consumers are going to get a little savvier and go, why do I need to spend $10 per transaction like Bitcoin? Now, I don't know what the transaction fee is. I think it varies here, but any transaction fee, it limits its capabilities in terms of doing to machine, which is going to be a huge component. It limits their ability to do microtransactions unless they have scaling and like sharding and off-chain components, which it looks like is on their roadmap, but I'm talking about right now at this moment. It would be hard to build on top of. And this timing is critical. A lot of people are getting into this space in 2018. And if you don't have some sort of platform to be building on now, if you're waiting until 2019, 2020 to release these new features, you're going to be behind the crowd. And again, I think other more innovative projects are nipping at Cardano's heel. I think that while Cardano is definitely interesting, I think that there are even projects that I've thrown out for the trade alerts, the last couple, that are just at another level. And I think you'd all agree with me on that. Those of you in the question and answer box, happy to hear your thoughts. So competition. So this is always a tricky slide for me because you can look at competition in a couple different ways. You can look at competition vertically, horizontally, tangentially. I'd say that the big competitors are probably Dragon Chain, Ethereum, and Neo. I don't know. I probably could have put EOS and the other one on here too, Verge. Although I'm allergic to Verge, like I refuse to even look at it. So maybe I'll karma will force me to to talk about it in our Coin Mastery series. But really, competition, if you're slicing it from the platform side, is really Ethereum, Dragon Chain, and Neo. Sorry about that. Because they are all looking to support companies that build on top of their platforms. So Neo's build is the smart economy. Dragon Chain is a platform that is like a turnkey solution that makes it very easy for companies to build their own smart contracts and have a level of security that a lot of other blockchains don't have. And I mean security and privacy relative to the data that's being shared with the blockchain. And then Ethereum is kind of the mother of all smart contract platforms because it was the first to implement it. So those are really the ones to beat if you're competing there. And then there's also, Litecoin and Ripple in terms of just being a store of value. So the ADA token, I believe it's called, right? ADA or ACA, which is the name of the coin, the Cardano coin. They're also looking to have it just be exchange of value. They're competing against Litecoin. You're always competing against Ripple in terms of exchange of value. They're also competing in terms of quantum resistance, which is IOTA. IOTA is looking to be quantum resistant. You're also competing against transaction speeds, where IOTA, Rayblox, Ripple, these all completely outweigh Cardano in its current iteration.